The clipboard was already in his hands before the car doors opened. That detail matters, not because it's dramatic, but because it's automatic. The ranger standing at the Chihuahuan Desert trailhead that July morning didn't reach for the form out of protocol. He reached for it out of something older than protocol: pattern recognition. The particular exhaustion of a man who has seen the same story begin the same way so many times that his hands have started reading the opening chapter before his eyes do. The rental car had pulled into the lot at 10:47 a.m., already past the safe start window by nearly 3 hours. The asphalt in the Big Ben parking area was soft enough to hold a boot print. The heat index was 108 degrees Fahrenheit in what shade existed, and there was no shade at all on the trail beyond the first quarter mile. He clocked the out-of-state plates before the engine cut. Here's what nobody asks about the rangers who work these trails. What does it cost a person to be right every time about the worst possible thing? This story is about a family, 4 adults who hiked together back home, who loved each other, who were genuinely good at this somewhere else. But it begins with a man who knew. Before he heard a voice, before he saw a face, before anyone laughed at the closure sign, he already knew. The question that will follow you through this entire story is not whether the warning was given. It was. The question is what it means when the warning lands and still nothing changes. He saw them before they saw the desert, and the desert, of course, had already seen them. There were 4 of them, David and Carol, mid-50s, the kind of couple who finish each other's sentences and sign Christmas cards with a single ampersand. Their son Marcus, 28, who had run a 10K the previous spring. Their daughter Priya, 26, who had posted a photo from a trail in Oregon just 6 weeks before. A tight unit, the kind of family that uses the word together as a point of pride. They were not reckless people. That's the part that matters most. Back home on the Carolina coast, they hiked. Real trails with elevation with roots and switchbacks. David had finished a half marathon at 53. They owned good shoes, you could see that from the parking lot. They had done their research in the sense that they had looked at the trail on an app and seen the distance. 6.8 miles, out and back, 1,200 feet of gain. Moderate. They had done moderate before. But here is what the app did not tell them, and what their bodies had no way of knowing. Sea level fitness does not transfer to desert elevation. The Chihuahuan Plateau sits above 4,000 feet, where the air is thinner and the sun has less atmosphere to fight through before it finds you. The relative humidity on that trail was hovering around 10%, the kind of dry that pulls moisture out of your lungs with every breath before you've taken a single step. Their coastal home averaged 75% humidity. Their bodies had spent decades calibrating to a completely different planet. And then there was the water. 1 16-ounce bottle, visible in Carol's hand as they crossed the lot. In 108 degrees Fahrenheit heat, with full sun exposure and sustained exertion, the human body needs roughly 1 liter per hour. A 4-hour trail for 4 people requires 16 liters minimum. They had brought less than half a liter. 1/8 of what a single person needed. The phones were already out. The hats were not. The ranger approached them before they even reached the trailhead sign. He had the numbers in his head. He was about to say them out loud, and the father was about to laugh. The ranger didn't ease into it. He'd learned years ago that easing in gives people room to interrupt with reassurances before the information has landed, so he started with the closure. Voluntary advisory, he told them. The trail above mile 1 was under a heat closure, not a suggestion buried in fine print. A posted advisory, the sign right there, with the temperature threshold printed in red. He pointed to it. David glanced at it the way you glance at a terms of service agreement. Then the ranger gave them the numbers. No water source on the route, cell signal ending at approximately mile 1.2, the nearest shade, the parking lot they were standing in at that exact moment. And then the ones that should have stopped the conversation entirely, 11 heat-related rescues on this specific trail over the past 3 summers. 2 fatalities. He wasn't lecturing. His voice was level, almost quiet. He spoke to them the way you'd want someone to speak to you, like adults capable of updating their decision given new information. He offered the park's water filling station, free, 30 seconds behind them. He gestured toward it. David listened, or appeared to. Then he did a small thing, a short laugh, a half turn back toward his family, and said it. "Looks too easy for us," Carol smiled. Marcus and Priya were already photographing the trailhead marker, phones up, framing the shot. The ranger documented the exchange, time 10:52 a.m., license plate, trail destination, verbal refusal of advisory. He couldn't ask them to sign anything. There was nothing to sign. He couldn't detain 4 adults who had already made up their minds somewhere back on the highway. He could only be right. He watched them pass the closure sign together, the way they did everything together, and he went back to his station and he waited. The Chihuahuan Desert does not look like a threat. That's the first thing you need to understand, and it's the thing that makes it so efficient. Big Bend sits at the confluence of 3 distinct weather systems: the dry Chihuahuan Plateau, the subtropical Gulf air mass, and the high-pressure systems that park over the Sonoran Basin in summer. What that combination produces from late June through early August is a sustained, almost mechanical heat. Not the dramatic shimmer of a movie desert, something quieter. Surface temperatures on exposed rock regularly exceed 120 degrees Fahrenheit. The air temperature alone, in shade that doesn't exist on this trail, was 108 degrees Fahrenheit that morning. And the sky was the particular pale blue of a place that has burned away every cloud. But here's what the desert doesn't do. It doesn't telegraph. A cliff face announces itself. A rapid is loud. The desert looks like a landscape you can simply walk through, which is precisely why Big Bend averages more than 250 search and rescue operations every year, with heat incidents clustering into a brutal 6-week window each summer. The trail this family chose is not considered difficult. The rangers will tell you that directly. Easy trails don't self-select for prepared hikers. They just select for confident ones. The physiology is worth understanding because it explains everything that was about to happen to David, Carol, Marcus, and Priya without any of them fully realizing it. When your core temperature rises, your body cools itself through sweat. That system requires water to function. As water intake falls below output, your blood thickens slightly, your heart works harder, and crucially, your cognitive function begins to degrade. Not dramatically, not with alarm bells. Survivors of serious heat exhaustion consistently describe the early phase the same way, just tired, a little dizzy, manageable. The terrifying part is that by the time a person recognizes something is genuinely wrong, they are typically already past the point where they can fix it themselves. The family had been on the trail for 40 minutes. By the rangers' estimate, they had already consumed whatever water they brought. The math was no longer theoretical. The first mile of that trail is almost beautiful. Ocotillo stands on both sides of the path, tall, thorned, otherworldly, and the Lechuguilla pushes up from the hardpan like something that decided to survive through sheer stubbornness. The parking lot is still visible behind them. The grade is gentle. The sky is enormous in the way that desert skies always are. And if you've never stood under one before, there's a moment where it stops you. They were probably talking. That's what families do on the first mile. David probably leading the way fathers do, Priya and Marcus a few steps back, Carol watching the landscape with the particular attention of someone who will want to describe it later. And here is the cruelest part. It felt exactly like David said it would, easy, manageable. The heat was uncomfortable, the way a hot car is uncomfortable before the air conditioning kicks in, something you're aware of, something you're tolerating, not something that feels like a countdown. The body doesn't announce what's happening to it, it just quietly begins the process. And in that first mile, the desert gave them nothing, no signal, no alarm, nothing to contradict the decision already made back in the parking lot. This is a documented pattern in desert fatality cases. Researchers who study group behavior in wilderness emergencies have found that parties are statistically far less likely to turn back than solo hikers. In some studies, groups turn back at less than half the rate of individuals traveling alone. No one wants to be the person who called it. In a family that does things together, turning back carries a specific weight. It feels like a vote against the unit. So they kept walking. The parking lot shrank behind them. The signal, the ranger had said, ends at mile 1.2. At some point past that marker, one of them reached for a phone. Back at the station, the ranger was not sitting still. That's worth saying clearly, because it would be easy to picture him frozen at a window watching the horizon. That's not what this looks like. There were other visitors, other conversations. A couple from Phoenix who needed the backcountry permit explained. A group of college students he talked out of a sunset start. The work continued the way work does, even when something else is running underneath it. But the family was there, a background process as constant as the heat. He knew the timeline the way a doctor knows a chart. By 1 p.m., they would be somewhere near the turnaround point, if they'd turned around at all, standing in full midday sun with nothing left to drink and bodies that had been sweating hard for 2 hours. By 2 p.m., if they were attempting the return leg, they'd be moving in peak heat, already compromised, with 3.4 miles still between them and the parking lot. He'd done this math before. He'd done it many times. The documentation he filed at 10:52 a.m. is not bureaucracy. It's the beginning of the rescue report. Rangers in high-fatality parks have described this in interviews, the particular weight of the documented refusal. The form where you wrote down everything you said, everything they said, and then you watched them walk past the sign anyway. The clipboard doesn't create distance, it just proves you tried. At 2 p.m., he started watching the trailhead, not constantly, but the way you check a clock when you're waiting for something you don't want to arrive. A glance, then another. The trail mouth sitting open in the white afternoon light, empty. Have you ever known something was coming and been completely unable to stop it? That specific helplessness. Drop your answer in the comments because that's exactly where the ranger was. At 3:17 p.m., a hiker coming off a different trail said she'd seen a family sitting on the ground near mile 2. Not resting, just sitting, not moving. The ranger was already moving before she finished the sentence. They found them 200 meters past where the woman had described, not sitting anymore. David was on his hands and knees. Carol was upright but not oriented. She was facing the wrong direction, back toward the deeper trail, away from the parking lot, away from everything she needed. Marcus had his arm around Priya and was speaking to her in a low, steady voice, which told the ranger two things immediately. Marcus was the most functional of the four, and he was scared enough to be trying to calm someone else down. Looks too easy for us. 4 words, a half laugh, a glance back at his family. That phrase has a name in psychology, even if David didn't know it. Researchers studying outdoor recreation accidents have documented a specific pattern. Competence in one environment creates a feeling of competence that transfers to new environments, even when the actual skills don't. You've hiked before, you've done hard things before. The confidence is real, it's just pointing at the wrong terrain. This is the Dunning-Kruger effect in its most dangerous form. Not ignorance mistaken for knowledge, something subtler. Genuine capability in one context mistaken for capability in all contexts. David wasn't lying about his family's fitness, he was misreading which fitness mattered here. But the laugh wasn't just a cognitive error, that's the part worth sitting with. When the ranger finished speaking, something happened in David that had nothing to do with trail conditions. His identity, provider, capable, the father who does hard things with his family, had just been briefly threatened by a stranger with a clipboard. And the laugh was how he resolved that threat. Quickly, cleanly, by making the warning small enough that it couldn't touch him. This is documented. Researchers studying group behavior in wilderness emergencies consistently find that parties with a strong shared identity around capability are among the hardest to turn around at a trailhead. Because for them, retreat isn't a logistical adjustment, it's a statement about who they are. The laugh wasn't stupidity, it wasn't contempt, it was a pressure valve, the sound of a man protecting something that mattered to him, using the only tool available in that moment. The desert does not care about the psychology behind the decision. It doesn't grade on intent. But understanding that laugh, really understanding it, is the only way to interrupt it before the clipboard comes out. Which brings us back to the ranger at the trailhead and what it costs to be right about something you wish you were wrong about. But here's where it gets more complicated than simple overconfidence, and this is the reversal most people miss entirely. David wasn't just making a physical calculation, he was protecting something. Researchers who study group dynamics in wilderness emergencies have found that families, particularly those with a strong shared identity built around capability, are statistically among the hardest groups to redirect at a trailhead. The reason isn't stubbornness, it's social architecture. For David, turning back wasn't just a logistical adjustment, it was a statement about who he was. The provider, the capable one, the father who does hard things with his family, not the one who flinches at a sign. The laugh wasn't contempt for the ranger, it was a pressure valve. His identity had just been briefly threatened, and the laugh resolved the tension the only way available to him in that moment, by making the threat small. You've done this, so have I, not on a desert trail maybe, but in a meeting, a conversation, a moment where someone offered a warning and something in you needed to minimize it before it could land. If you recognize that impulse, if you've watched yourself do exactly what David did in a different context, subscribe to this channel. Not for me. But to be part of a community of people who are honest enough to ask uncomfortable questions about their own judgment. And now here's the part of the story that doesn't make the rescue report. The ranger who reached David first knelt beside him in the dirt and said simply, "I've got you. Stop moving." Not "I told you so." Not a single word about the clipboard, the sign, the documented refusal filed at 10:52 a.m. Just, "I've got you." All four were evacuated, all four recovered. The medical team later estimated that David's core temperature had reached 103.7 degrees Fahrenheit, the threshold above which cognitive impairment becomes clinically measurable. At 104 degrees Fahrenheit, organ stress begins. They had approximately 30 minutes of margin left when the ranger found them. 30 minutes. That is the distance between a story that ends this way and one that doesn't. The ranger will be at that trailhead tomorrow morning. Another car will pull in, out-of-state plates probably, good shoes visible from across the lot. Someone will laugh at the sign. Not cruelly, not stupidly, but with the particular confidence of a person who has done hard things before and survived them. And he will reach for his clipboard before the doors open, because his hands have learned to read the opening chapter before his eyes do. That gesture carries everything now. The 11 rescues, the 2 fatalities, the documented refusals filed in triplicate, proving only that the warning was given. The clipboard isn't bureaucracy, it's accumulated grief with a metal clip. Here's what this story was never really about. It wasn't about a family that underestimated a desert. It wasn't about arrogance or recklessness or people who should have known better. David wasn't wrong to believe his family was capable. They were capable on the Carolina coast, on moderate trails with roots and switchbacks and sea-level air. That capability was real. He'd earned the right to be proud of it. The desert didn't punish him for that pride. It simply required something different than what pride is built on. Preparation is not the absence of confidence. It's what confidence is supposed to be built on. The distinction sounds small. It isn't. Confidence that hasn't been tested in a specific environment is just a feeling, and feelings don't negotiate with heat indices. The family had done the research in the sense that they had looked at the numbers, but they had never asked the harder question, does what I know actually apply here? That question is the one the ranger couldn't ask for them. Nobody can ask it for you. So here is where the story stops being about a family in the Chihuahuan Desert and starts being about the person watching this video. You have a version of David's laugh somewhere in you, a domain where your track record has made you certain, a place where a warning might arrive and something in you would need to make it small before it could land, not out of contempt, out of protection. The question the Ranger's clipboard has been asking this entire time isn't, how could they be so foolish? It's quieter than that, more personal. What do I think I know that I haven't tested? That's the question the Ranger was holding when he reached for his clipboard before the car doors opened. He already knew the answer for David's family. The harder version, the one that actually changes behavior, is the one you have to answer for yourself before someone in a uniform is standing between you and the sign.